we get started? Thanks for joining us today, Debbie. We have lots to get through. Probably won't even get through it all.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today we're covering customer education programs. So how to start a customer education program. And then Debbie and I will chat about trends that we're seeing or, trends even that we're implementing. And of course, we know trained customers, they not only renew at a higher rate, but more likely to use the product more, features and functions, submit fewer customer support tickets. So really important to get that customer education program started the right way. If you're just starting your education program, then this event or session is perfect for you because you have an opportunity to hear tips and tricks to really get it going the right way. And if you've already launched your program, maybe you'll pick up some great information today to make some improvements. So today we'll talk about all sorts of topics from starting your program to making your program better at growing that. If you have a customer training business and you sell the training, or even if it's internal, how do you grow that effectively and efficiently? And then of course we'll get into talking about trends like AI. How do you use videos, avatars, text to speech, translation, topics? And then I'm sure many of you deal with how do we scale the content development. So super hard, of course, to create all the training that we have that's in the backlog, but then how do we update it? How do we really scale that to maximize the requests on the team? And we'll pull in talking about who we need in the organization to support the learning program. And of course, I'm excited to ask Debbie about that because I know you have a great perspective on what it looks like today, but where we need to be hiring in the future as well as AI comes about. So I'll just introduce myself quickly and then I'll hand it over to Debbie for an intro and we'll get into the questions. I'm Sarah Sedgman. I've spent 25 years in tech and I started as an instructional designer, course developer at a company called Cognos, and then moved into the management side. So I ran curriculum teams, I ran large learning programs, and we had our main focus usually was customer training. So we needed a really well-oiled learning program and machine to develop the training and deliver it. But we also supported partners, employees, customer support, success. We even, over my career, had academic programs too. So lots of different perspectives. And I know Debbie has a similar career path. So we know each other through SEDMA, which Debbie will talk a little bit about, but that's the Customer Education Management Association. And then, of course, just, I don't know, we go way back, Debbie, what, 15 years, 10 years, 12 years?
Yeah, I don't even remember how long actually at this point.
So Debbie and I chat often, actually. We always are sharing ideas and swapping, how we've dealt with certain challenges in the industry. And that's why I was excited to have her as part of the panel today. So Debbie, over to you.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm Debbie Smith. I am the Senior Director at Visier University, where I run a small but mighty team that gets a lot done now, which is really great. And I'm also the president of SEDMA. SEDMA is the Customer Education Management Association, and we have a conference coming up in April. It is April 22nd and 23rd. Hint, if you're not already a SEDMA member, if you join SEDMA and then register, your conference pass will be a little bit less expensive. So join SEDMA and then come to our conference. We'd love to have you, and we have a great agenda with some great speakers coming. Donna Weber will be doing one of the keynotes, and Lila, I'm sorry?
She's awesome.
She is awesome. And her real focus is customer onboarding and all the handoffs and all the cross-functional work we do. And then Lila Meyer from Gainsight will be doing the keynote on the second day. So some really great keynotes this year, so would love to have you all. My background in education goes way, way back. I talk about my education background as my adult career, which is the career I chose after I had my kids. Did a lot of things before that, but after having kids, I actually started teaching, and I have taught every single grade level, and I've literally taught people from 2 to 95 how to use different types of technology. And I've also taught in just about every industry in the US right now. I've crossed all different fields, so I have a different perspective because I've had lots of experiences in different places. And this is the 6th SaaS company that I've been at doing customer education at. But I did customer education before I even knew what customer education was, which is really, it was pretty funny because my first foray into it was actually teaching superintendents how to use software, because the superintendents were our customers. So lots of different experiences.
Yes, if you ever have the chance to get to know Debbie better, she'll tell you all about the stories of all the things she's done in her background, almost everything. So it's actually fascinating. But of course, you've been on so many different podcasts lately and panels. So of course, we had to have you too. So I'm super excited about our discussion today. So I'm going to jump into the broadest level around a learning program. So I know you've jumped into many roles where you've been tasked to build a learning program from scratch, or there is a program, but it isn't working and you've had to kind of rip it apart and rebuild it. So maybe starting there, if you could tell us about, where would you start when approaching a new learning program, or even if you've jumped in and there's some learning that exists, but you really need to build that up or rebuild it. What are some of those basics that you go back to figure out how to approach a learning program for the first time?
Great question. So jobs to be done framework has become my new favorite thing. And so and the reason it's my favorite piece is because it's focusing on the customer and it forces you to focus on the customer. So many training programs focus on the technology instead of the customer, and that's not actually going to help you grow what you need to grow as a customer education team. You really need to focus on the customer. What is the job that the customer is actually trying to do? And once you can identify the main jobs that they're doing in your software, then you identify all the tasks. It really helps give you a better alignment, both cross-functionally, but for the customer experience, and it helps you build out what you really need most important for your customers first. So that's really where I like to start now.
And jobs to be done, I love that framework. I've heard you talk about that before as well. But great to think about the jobs, because then you think about the tasks that they need to do versus if it's product training features and functionality. But there's customer jobs to be done. Would you also treat, if people were developing or starting a program from scratch for sales or partners, would you advise or recommend they think of them as their customer? How would you approach them?
Great question. So customers are the people that you serve, and we all have internal customers, and then we often have external customers. So yes, if you are in sales enablement, then your customer is really all of the sales team, and often then to the Rev Ops team. If you're in HR, then your customers are all of the employees. So what are the jobs that they're really trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And how do you get them or help them improve those skills to do those jobs? So yes, jobs to be done works for everyone because everyone is really a customer. And we really need to have that customer service mindset, whether we're working with internal folks or with external folks. They're all our customers.
Awesome. And then when you kind of get to the next step and you start to think about, there's the jobs to be done, and you start to map that out, maybe by role or type of learner, when's the right time to start thinking about how to train them? So, do you need what type of modality to train them in, instructor-led or e-learning, micro-learning, video-based training? And I asked that question actually because I myself see a lot of mistakes where sometimes a company will start with the different audiences and jump right into what type of training do they need.
Yeah, you need to figure out where your learners are, right? Depends on where they are. What are they going to have access to? How much training do they need, and where does their focus need to be? And e-learning is much more scalable. You can get to more people faster once it's developed, but the development time is a little bit longer than developing instructor-led. So sometimes it's easier to start with an instructor-led and flip it into e-learning afterwards. But it really depends on what your customers are trying to accomplish and where they're going to be. If you're someplace where they only have mobile phone, you're going to design different. So you may need to pull them together in instructor-led, or you may need to do a virtual. If they've got access to computer, iPads, things like that, then e-learning you can do pretty quickly.
Awesome. When do you think the right time is to decide the modality, like how you want to deliver the training to the learner? Is it early on in the process? Is it later?
You have to decide early on. If you wait until later, you're going to start to develop something, and then you're going to say, oh, wait a second, this isn't going to work. So one of the first things that when you're designing it, you have to know what you're designing for. And you can actually design both at the same time, which is what I like. Best case scenario is developing both at the same time, because it does save time. We don't get around to doing that often. We choose one modality and just go down with that one modality first. My focus right now, we're trying to really scale and reach a lot of people at the same time. And that's the goal of the company, is to scale. So I'm focused primarily on e-learning for scale, but I also have this other side of my business that's really just focused on the instructor-led. And I find, if you have a small team, you have to figure out which resources you have. And if you're coming to someplace that already has the team, then you have to figure out what the skill set is. And based on that skill set is actually going to drive a lot of whether you do instructor-led or e-learning. But you have to know at the beginning. You always have to start with the end in mind, because if you don't know where you're going or what the purpose of what you're doing is, you're not going to be successful. And so understanding why customer education exists at your company, or why does L&D exist on an HR team? What is the purpose of it? What is the purpose of sales enablement, really? And understanding how you drive those goals is crucial.
Awesome. Okay, switching. Oh, before I ask another question, just if anyone who's attending has a question, just pop it in the chat. So I'll monitor the chat and I'll pull your questions in as well. So feel free to add a question or ask something at any time. If we switch to think about now maybe you've thought about the jobs to be done, you've started to map out what the courses are, what the learning program looks like. You've started to think about the modality. So does it need to be instructor-led, e-learning, micro-learning, video, combination of those? Then of course you need an org structure. So again, I know you've gone in and helped companies build out the learning program, but then of course the next thing you need to think about is who you need to help you do it. So what does the best practice org structure look like? What are some of the key roles that somebody would want to start with or have on the team? And then what challenges have you faced creating that business case to get the headcount you need?
That's always a challenge. So from my perspective, the best practice for an org structure, depends on the size of you. If you have 3 people, or whether you have 30 people, but basically you're doing 3 different functions in a customer education team. Customer education, you've got your instructional designer, your learning experience designer, your content development, right? That's one function that exists on customer education. Then you have another separate function, which is your training, your instructor-led, and then I separate out certification. And I keep those 3 as 3 separate functions. I think that's the best case to do it. And the reason is because people will try to hire one person to do all. Those are unicorns, or maybe they're even alicorns. I think they're harder to find than unicorns. Oh, alicorns, if you don't know what an alicorn is, an alicorn is a flying unicorn. They actually have wings. So it is a mythical beast from Ireland. And I think they're harder to find. To find someone that can actually deliver good training, can develop good training, can develop e-learning, and can do certification, they're three very different skill sets. So separating them out into that. And then if you can afford or get the headcount for, which I have never successfully done yet, is it would be wonderful to have a training ops person, but I've never been successful in getting that headcount for the training ops.
And what would the training ops person do?
The training ops would do a number of things that would really help. They can do they can do LMS admin. They can do, there's so many cross-functional meetings, and there's so many integrations that we run in customer education. We use a ton of tech stack. And when I was looking at it yesterday, I actually had to tell my procurement team how many different software that we were using just in the Visier University side. And I realized we're using 12 separate pieces of software just for the university piece, not including things like Microsoft 365 or the Google Suite, right? Just for our tech stack is that large. So having a training ops person to be able to manage all of the different tech pieces, and then send all of the campaigns, email campaigns, and manage all of that for us would be really sweet to have.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing your business case on that one. We can copy you. And then when you think of the course developers, how would someone figure out how many people they need to build the training, like in those three buckets, build the training, deliver, and then certification? How do you know how many you need, and what skill set would you typically look for if you were hiring someone or like pulling someone from within the team, within the company?
So the skill sets that I'm looking for are actually changing, which is interesting, and they're changing in part because of AI. So I do want so on the instructional side, so on the learning experience design or instructional design side, I've actually shifted away from instructional design and more towards learning experience design. I have a matrix that lists out the different skill sets for a course developer versus an instructional designer versus a learning experience designer. And the learning experience design takes a blend of both instructional design and sort of that UX ability, because you really need to be able to understand how things display on a screen. So you need some of that UX in order to be able to do it. With the change for AI that I'm looking for is I'm really going less on the instructional side, because what I'm finding is people who are super excited about instructional design and they're focused on the instruction and they love their process and they have a hard time giving up the traditional process and moving faster. With my LXDs, I have a content quota for my team. Each person needs to create at least one course a month in order to maintain their KPIs. So it's pretty aggressive, but it's actually pretty doable. And I do have a calculator that I can plug everything into to see how many courses we can do. And when I plug, and originally it was created by Sharon Castillo. And so I've taken that and morphed that to be exactly what I need. So when I go to do a business case for my headcount, I simply say, how many courses do you want? Because this is how many courses I can create per person, and this is how many courses we can maintain, because you can't just create a course and forget about it. You have to maintain it. So being able to blend all of that is super important. And yes, I will, I'm being pinged if I will share that matrix. Yes, I will share the matrix. I will send it over to Sarah so Sarah can send it out with the recording.
I was gonna say, where do we find all of these great templates? I'm thinking you have to create like a website called Debbie Smith with all your great templates and advice.
I bought customereducation.club, so that will be out there eventually, but to put all of these resources on, because there's a lot of them.
That's another, just speaking of customer education, that's another group, that's a networking group that you're involved in as well. If people on the call are interested in that, how do they find that?
So there are two different communities besides SEDMA. So SEDMA has its own Slack community. There is customereducation.org, which is a free Slack channel. And then Dave and Adam have started a customer education community on Circle. And if you reach out to them at CE Lab, they can connect you on that one. So customer education is really catching on fire this year. And we have all of these communities, which is great. And it gives a lot of us share all the resources on it. So finished where I was answering on, so for your LXDs, it's 12 courses per person. So you have to figure out what you want to develop. With your instructors, we usually look to get a 60 to 80% utilization. So how many courses they can actually teach. With certification, there's sort of a standard rule that a certification professional can run 3 exams. Once you add a 4th exam, you need to add another person. So everything I do is pretty mathematical to actually do it, because I have to make the business case. And if you don't have calculators, you can't make a business case.
Okay. Yeah. So talk to us a bit about the business case while we're on that topic, and then we'll jump to AI, because I know that's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic.
How have you been successful at getting the headcount you need? So using the mathematical approach, do you find that you have to network up and down and side by side peer, or how have you done it in the past?
Yes, you have to do all of it. You have to go side by side, because you have to figure out what the goals are of other teams and how can you help them with their goals. A great place, a great partner is your CS team, because often when a customer education team is being started, your CS team may be spending up to 50% of their time actually doing one-on-one training. So creating content that aligns to the training that they're doing is a great way to make a business case. If your product is launching, and every company I go to seems to launch a new product or a new business model, figuring out what product's goals are and how you can help grow them for product is super helpful. So I will go to my product team, I'll go to my CS team, I also go to my sales team, because we know that trained customers, they buy more product, they use more product, and they churn less. If your customers are learning, they're not churning, right? So working with the sales team is great. And then the marketing team too, because what we're finding is even though we're not creating prospect material, we are actually training our prospects before they're signing with us. So people who are looking at our software are taking our courses, and after taking the courses, they actually do sign. So it actually does help with sales too. So figuring out which is the most important goal for the company, and figuring out which person has the money, which C-suite has the pocketbook. And that's who you really need to partner with their goals. So figuring out who has that takes a little bit of time, but that's the most important thing to do, is figure out who has the money in your company.
Yeah, I really like the idea of, especially you're building training for customers, you know, finding those like organizations. So that was a great use case that you talked about, you know, just helping the customer success organization do their job by having the right people and the right training on your side, and then they'll support you in it. And definitely that'd be the case, kind of replicate that, but with the other, if you have sales enablement or HR partner. Awesome. Okay, let's jump over to the hot topic of AI. I know you started to talk a little bit too about who we need in the future, which I know just because we've had chats that's influenced by, you know, what's coming on the AI side. But what have you seen, you know, what's your take on AI tools in the content development space, or in building out the learning program, or even, I don't know if you've implemented or use of AI for the learner. So those are kind of different buckets. But what have you been experimenting with? What do you love? You know, what are some of your thoughts there?
So it was actually funny. My new CCO asked me, why do we even need to create training? Can't we just throw it all into ChatGPT and ChatGPT can answer it? Like, well, you know what? ChatGPT can do one thing really well. It can give you product training, right? But we don't actually do product training anymore. We do customer education, and there's a difference between the two of them. The difference is customer education is teaching you the skills you need to use the product. ChatGPT can give you the step-by-step how-to, but it misses all the best practices and it can't do that. And it's not going to be able to do that for a long, long time, if ever. And the hallucinations that it has, which is actually the technical term, which I think is quite funny. But ChatGPT does hallucinate a lot. So the content, it's just not accurate. And you really need a person to be able to go in and understand it and correct it. So the skills that we're needing as we use more AI are changing. We need people who are problem solvers and people who can ask really good questions and people who question absolutely everything that they read. And in working backwards, the Amazon practices book, they talk about how Jeff Bezos reads, and they say he reads different than most people. We need people to read the way Jeff Bezos does. Jeff Bezos reads a sentence, and at the end of every sentence, he stops and says, is that true or not true? At every single sentence. And when you're working with AI, you actually need to do that because a lot of times the sentences, if you read a paragraph, it sounds good, but if you actually think about what those individual sentences mean, it doesn't actually make sense. So that's something you really need to take into consideration with it. That being said, it's great for creating an outline for me on a topic that I'm not sure what I want to do. When I'm doing internal trainings, I'll have it start an outline for me. I'm also, as you know, using Leah, the LearnExperts AI, and I love that because I can take videos, put a video in from any of the internal trainings and get a real rough draft real fast that I can then go to my SMEs with, and it saves that a couple hours of going through the transcript to try to understand what they were actually talking about because it does it for me. And then I'm also using DALL-E, and DALL-E is the image generator from ChatGPT and Firefly from the Adobe suite. So I'm using some of those. At Visier, we have a really cool AI product, which is starting to show, we're starting to use more and more. It's called V, and it integrates right now with Teams. And so you can go into a Teams channel and just ask a question about your analytics, and it will immediately spin up the graphs and the charts, but it will only show the information that you have access to, so it actually stays within its security parameters, which is really cool. I can't wait till we get something that cool for customer education, because that would be cool when we get that, something like that.
What's your, so DALL-E, give us an example of what kind of graphics or images you create from DALL-E, because I know you do a lot of product training, so of course you can't generate those graphics, but what do you leverage it for?
So I leverage it more for background images or for slide decks when we're trying to create graphics for slide decks. Instead of using the standard clip art that everyone's seen 100 times, with DALL-E, you can just put in the text that you want and ask it to create the image, and you can do the same thing in Firefly. Firefly is really good with it from Adobe, because when you put it in, you have a whole panel on the right-hand side that you can change the artistic effects really quickly. So cool. It's pretty cool that way.
And then when you think about different types of content, so, you know, video, translation, text to speech, are you using any tools around, AI tools around those pieces? Do you recommend them? Are they also, you know, I'm hearing a lot from you, you know, the AI tools are great, but still we need a human to be decisive and, you know, add impact and make the right decisions. Have you used any of these other ones?
The only one that I have used much of is HeyGen. It's HeyGen. And I've used that one and Cluoso to create some videos. I would love to be able to use some of the other video products. I just haven't been able to afford them. My software budget, my software spend is pretty low, so I'm looking for free tools. So there is a newsletter that I subscribe to called There's an AI for That. And that's a great newsletter, and you get lots of free tools from there. So we'll experiment with different tools. But I haven't had the luxury of being able to onboard any of those. The only other one that I am actually in the process of onboarding, Stephanie's doing it for me, is we're bringing in Bongo Learn. And Bongo Learn has an AI companion. So we put our rubric into it. You can do a video presentation and it will grade your students for you. So we're using that one to do some grading now. So I'm really excited about that one.
Yeah, that sounds awesome too. Just so everyone knows, Debbie, as you can see, is very resourceful. So I often go to her too and ask, hey, I'm trying to do this. Do you have any tools or places where I can go to ask people? So we'll make sure to send some of these resources out in the follow-up email where we include the recording. So don't worry if you didn't catch it during the webinar. Okay, great. So AI, we talked a little bit about ChatGPT. Just on the ChatGPT side a little bit, because I know people are experimenting, and some comments I've heard or have come to me is, we won't need a learning team anymore. ChatGPT, anyone can just use ChatGPT and build courses in the future. Perhaps some of that's happening a little bit now, even within Visier, where subject matter experts are creating courses. How do you manage that, or how do you anticipate managing that in the future?
So I think with ChatGPT, the thing that you have to be aware of too is that if you're not using the paid version, which most people aren't, most people are using the free version, everything you put into it is becoming part of public domain and is used to train it, right? So you need to be conscious of that. I think ChatGPT can give you an outline. It can give you a basis, but it can't do all of the writing for you. Everything it writes will be slightly off, and you can tell that it's just not quite right. It's sort of like when you have, how do I say that the right way? Sometimes people will talk, but they haven't actually done the work. And if you haven't done the work, your words are right, but there's just something not quite ringing true to someone who actually does it. And you'll find that type of thing in the courses that ChatGPT does. And I don't believe that will get better for a long time. And ChatGPT, I was talking with someone the other day who was writing a best practices course, and they were like, they tried to do it in ChatGPT. They tried really hard because it was a product that's been around for, but ChatGPT can't understand and can't define what the best practices are. That has to come from a human. And so, although we'll use it to help us draft and to help us start, the best part about something like that is you don't have a white page anymore. A blank white page is the scariest thing for most people, and it's the hardest thing to start from. So it can help with that, but it will never be a replacement.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. Just a reminder, if you have a question, pop it into the chat, and I'll weave that into some of my questions. Of course, Debbie and I, we could talk about this all day, so we can keep going as well. But if you have a particular question, and Debbie's an expert, so now's the time to ask, just pop it in the chat. Another question around, so you talked a little bit about working with other learning teams or other groups within the company around building your business case. But have you ever worked with some of those other teams to collaborate on, even the starting point of the training material, or pulled in subject matter experts? Where do other organizations and their expertise fit within collaboration with your group?
I think one of the things that it probably took me a little too long to learn, quite honestly, is how important cross-functional collaboration is. Cross-functional collaboration, working with your product team, your product marketing team, your sales team, your CS team, your support team, is so important, because when they help you and when do reviews for your courses, what it does is it unifies the language at a for the customers. I've been at many companies. In fact, most companies have this problem, that if a customer talks to a support person, or if they talk to their CSM, or if they talk to the product team, they'll get 3 very different explanations of things, all using different words. And then we wonder why our customers are confused. So that cross-functional collaboration is huge. And making sure that our language is aligned and getting constant feedback from the other teams is really important. And I had an interesting conversation with someone on my development team who was telling me that I should only use the words that are in product. Well, of course, we're going to use the words that are in product, but we're also going to use words to explain what you mean in product, because when you developed it, you may or may not have talked to all of your customers, which most of them haven't. So the words that you use in product very often are not the words that the customer is using. And I mean, you even see this like in an LMS, right? If all LMSs use the same words, life would be easier, right? Some LMSs have modules, some have courses, some have lessons, and then they have them stacked in different places too. They're all different. So that unification of language doesn't exist, and cross-functional work on courses is a unifying piece for your customers. It's also helpful because then product sees how you're talking about it, and they're like, oh, wait, maybe we should change that. There's an old adage in usability. It's stupid user, stupid user, stupid user. Crap, I have to change that, right? Because the first few times a customer does something, we're like, okay, it's just one user. Maybe it's 2. Okay, the third time you see a customer make a mistake, that's when people start to fix things.
Then it's not user error anymore.
That's right. It's all of a sudden, oh, I didn't think about this right. I should have thought of the customer first, and I didn't. I was thinking internal. And that whole focus from internal to external strategy is really big, because everything your company does has to be outside in when you're working with customers. You do things for inside out reasons, right? Inside out means we're really talking about the business and what the business wants and how the business is going. And when we start a business, we tend to be very inside out. As the company scales and as you get into growth stage companies and larger companies, you really have to become more customer focused and switch your entire language and everything you're doing to be more customer focused. And customer education can really help lead the way in that. And it happens through cross-functional collaboration.
How do you, there's that question that I have from the chat, which I'll ask in one sec, but how do you approach the collaboration with other teams to start? Like, how do you get them motivated? Because everyone's busy doing 1,000 things. How do you get them motivated to help you or to collaborate?
Great question. You figure out what their goals are, and you attach your projects to their goals. So product marketing managers and product managers always have a goal of feature and product adoption, right? So if we can train on those features, although we don't use the word features and benefits, we talk about the jobs that customers are doing. If we can highlight some of those features and functions for them, then they're going to be more willing to buy in. If it's your support team, taking a look at what the most asked support tickets are around the area that you're training and actually figuring out and answering those, how do I, or how did I do this wrong, and including those best practices that support is trying to get across is huge for support. For sales, you need to show them, you have to show how your training impacts their goals. That really helps. I usually do a monthly cross-team collaboration type meeting to let everyone know what we're doing, where we're working, and then making sure we're announcing everything that we're doing is becoming a bigger focus for me now too.
Oh yeah, communication. We might not even get to that piece, but that's super important too. Okay, so a question came in that talks about the jobs to be done. So someone who's attending asked, how do you start when you don't know the jobs to be done, if you don't know the jobs that customers need to do? And then the next question is from Christine, but we'll get to that one in a second.
So if you don't know what your customers are trying to do, there's two ways to start doing it. One way is to do a data dump out of your support tickets, and you'll find out real quickly what they're trying to do because they will be putting support tickets in. The other thing is talking to customers. You really need to talk to customers and ask them, what is it they're trying to do? I love doing something called a think aloud, which you actually give a customer a task to do in product, and then you have them talk about step by step as they're doing it, and you watch what they're doing, you listen to what they're saying, and you'll really figure out quickly what they're doing. That is primarily what a UX researcher does. So if you have UX researchers at your company, getting their recordings of their customer interviews, it's like gold. It's absolutely gold, because you really hear it in the customer's words from the UX researchers. But if you don't have them, then you need to do those yourself to really understand what the customers are trying to do.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, actually, because, you know, I've developed training forever, but sometimes you think you know what they need to know in what order, but actually watching them try to do something or walk you through, definitely you could learn from them that benefits everyone else.
Exactly.
Other techniques too for jobs to be done. Sometimes, you know, I think in my past, I've maybe started with, if your company has personas, you have to be careful with personas because typically they're developed by marketing. So they're going to have a marketing focus. So it doesn't always relate to training, but that can help get started. Or you can look at how people buy the software. So that helps you identify the roles. Like if there's an administrator role, then you know that that's a job to be done, an administrator set of tasks. Or working with product management. So if you have a connection or relationship with some of the product managers, they really have to think about the go-to-market approach, right? So why do people, what's the value in using the software? Why do people, or any solution, it doesn't have to be software, but why would people use it? For what purpose? What jobs do they need to do? So I think I love that jobs to be done, because you can continue to have the conversations in that framework and keep coming back to asking the question, what jobs do you need to do, or what's the value you're getting? Like, what is the outcome that you need to get to, and how do you get there? So that's a great framework. Hopefully that helped answer that question. Did you have something?
The other place to look to, they're probably doing it and they're calling it something else, is your sales team. If they're doing value-based selling, yes, they're actually looking at the jobs that people need to do because they're selling the value of it, right? So understanding what your sales team is actually selling can also help you understand what your customers are doing. So it's not someplace that I used to know to reach out to, but it is definitely someplace I do now. I go through all the sales training on a regular basis just to understand what they're doing.
That's a really good point. From Christine, I think it's related to the organization. How do you determine which is the most important if you only get one? So I think she's asking about headcount, or, you know, a group of headcount. Where do you start?
Okay, yeah, great question. And hey, Christine, thanks for joining. It depends on what the goal is. I've come into companies where the goal was certification, that the CEO mandated a certification was going to be done. So in that case, it was, okay, I'm going to do it to certification. I've had other places where it's been scale. If it's scale, you're going to focus on e-learning. If it's white glove service is the focus of the company, then you're going to start with the ILT. So it's really going to depend on what the goals and the purpose of your program are, which is really where you need to start with everything, is what is the purpose? Why are you creating training? Some people don't like to hear this, but I say it quite frequently. I don't train customers so they learn how to use the software. Nope. I'm not about the learning. I'm not about the course completions. I really don't care if you complete the course. I train customers so they buy more product, they use more product, they don't churn. That's the only reason I train. Training is the vehicle that I use to meet my business goals. So I'm really super focused on my business goals.
Yeah, I love that. So tying into the business goals, of course, tying into the overall strategy and business goals will always help you get what you need as well. So as you help the company achieve the goals, you're going to get probably more headcount or more support to continue to do those things.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Another question, Debbie, is there flexibility in your KPIs? For example, if one course is much longer than the other, has the course number been working for you, or do you recommend doing amount of minutes or content created?
So I'm flexible in that we have to create the 12 courses a year. Some of the courses are going to be shorter, faster. So one quarter we might create 4 or 5, and then the next quarter it might be 2. So there's some flexibility in there. I look at it over the year, and if they're creating a large instructor-led training or a large course that's going to take days for a customer to go through, that's obviously a different level. Most of the courses that I create at this point for e-learning, though, are under an hour for a customer. I just find that with e-learning, it's better to break it down to that level and then to break it down further into lessons. And I think it's really important to break things down into lessons that customers can get in and out of quickly.
Okay, awesome. Video, there's some questions on video tools. Any thoughts or experience on any video editing tools that can speed up the process? Things like basic editing for e-learning. Do you know any video tools that you use or that you've heard the industry talk about that are good?
So I would love to get Synthesia. I would love to have that one. I haven't been able to afford that. That one does some great video generation, and it makes life so much easier for translations too, that I would really love to have that one. Cluoso does some really cool things. Cluoso's product is actually a browser plugin that you can create your videos very quickly, and it will create a text version and a video version, which I really like that one. Yeah, it's very cool. Vidiate is another one that I know a lot of people use and like. We use Camtasia right now. They have a feature called Audiate, which allows for the editing of the text very easily, and so that one's actually speeds up the process. I'm a fan of Audiate. I had that at my last company. I don't have it at this one.
Okay, I've heard good things about Synthesia for sure.
Yeah.
But also Vidiate. I didn't know that about Camtasia. That's cool. Quickly before I get to the next question, I'm just going to ask you about frameworks. Do you use particular learning frameworks in your learning program or design?
So there's two frameworks that to me are super important, and it is Mayer's 12 principles, and that's about the design on the screen, and then cognitive load theory. Those are the two that I think everyone needs to know. And the intersection of them is really something pretty cool because it comes up with some cool boundaries and ways to do things. I'm not a huge framework person per se, probably because I've learned them all. So I take little bits and pieces of them, but I've also followed people. I've come into companies where people got really obsessed with like Gagne's 9 events, and they were trying to put Gagne's 9 events into a 20-minute training, which like was crazy. It made their process convoluted and overloaded, and it made the courses really weird. So I think it's really important to understand the different frameworks, but then know that how you can back off of them. because most of those frameworks actually come from real academic studies. And although we are teaching and we're learning and we're using the learning science, trying to jam a whole framework is too hard. And I often say I've been bloomed to death. I've been done Bloom's framework so many times that it's like, nope. I actually had a shirt printed at one point that said "Bloomed to death" because we did so much studying of Bloom's taxonomy. So I've drawn back on some of my learning theory.
I totally agree with that approach. I think there's a place for the proven frameworks and models, but then I think simplifying those helps. So we typically will go with a framework of just tell me what I need to know, show me how to do it, let me try it myself, test me on it. And that fits into those formal frameworks, but really we like to simplify it and say, if you follow that framework of those 4 components, then someone will have a guaranteed good learning outcome. And you can apply that to a 15-minute or 5-minute thing or a 6-hour course. So I agree.
Yeah, exactly. It's the, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, right? And you can do that in exactly that type of framework. So, the show me, try it, test it. Something that actually shocked me in customer education coming out of education, out of the K-20 space, I was surprised that customers wanted tests and quizzes at the end of everything. And a lot of people, when they come over to customer education, say, oh, no, we don't need to do quizzes. I did an experiment where I put quizzes into some of my courses when I was in ID, and then every course that we didn't have quizzes at the end of, we got lower ratings on, and we got the feedback from customers consistently that they wanted quizzes because quizzes allowed them to know if they learned what they were supposed to learn from the course. And that was surprising.
See, I always think people put quizzes in so they can track if the learner learned, which of course they do that, but that's interesting from the learner.
Yeah, I thought it was weird. I really was. I was surprised.
So there's a question on onboarding compared to everboarding. I've never heard of that. Everboarding. I like it. Do you take different approaches when thinking of onboarding compared to everboarding?
Great question. So, onboarding, we start with a team that's actually joining for the first time, but we really need to be everboarding too. So onboarding, we need to be completely detailed. Everything needs to be step by step with all of the best practices. When people are everboarding, we really need to go to that next level. And if you look at many customer education programs, mine included, we are talking really about most of the training we do is the onboarding piece, right? And then we don't get to the technical stuff because we never have big enough teams. We don't get, and that's the number one question from customers. Every single company I've been at, I have heard customers say, we need more details. We need more advanced materials. And so that's one of the things that I'm hoping that AI is going to help us with by producing content faster. We're actually going to get to be able to do those advanced courses for them because that's really what customers want. Most of the basic stuff customers can figure out today. Customers are more tech savvy than ever. So that everboarding piece, that more advanced material, plus if someone leaves the company and you've got a new person coming on, they don't want to go through a full onboarding, so they need to be able to pick and choose their pieces. So making sure that things are chunked in a way that people can actually get to what they're looking for. As I told you, I don't really care about course completion. I care about when you use a piece of learning, what do you do next? Does it help you do your job? Do you use more product after that? So I look at the enrollments that people are taking.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that just so many years building learning content that organizations should want to push the learners to that more advanced material, and yet often the learning org isn't staffed enough to be able to do everything. But exactly. The more we push, the more users, I guess, that want to be more advanced, they're the ones that become the deep advocates. They stay with the company. Those are the ones that we see if they jump to another company, they're recommending your solution to the new company. So it always perplexed me over the years, why don't we staff up so that we can push people towards that more advanced learning? And of course, I'm sure you've been at companies where they said there's no learning required. So that brings us to, I think, the final question that came in. How do you think about product-led growth, where now within software products or solutions, there's a lot of guidance being put in place or a lot of investment around the user experience? What is your viewpoint on when people say, well, we'll just have the training in product, little mini videos, or we don't need training?
Well, that is product training, not customer education. And that's why customer education is so important, because customer education is the skills to use the product. So for example, at Visier, we are a people analytics company. We teach people how to tell a story with data, which is bigger than just how to click and how to do things in product, right? But actually teaching how to develop a storyline, how to think about your end users, that's the best practice. So we're teaching those skills, not just the product. We're teaching the product at the same time. And we use our product to teach these skills, but really focusing on the skills that people need. When I was at Smartsheet, we needed to teach project management, but we needed to also teach how to do requirements gathering, right? Because you don't want to do a project if you haven't gathered the requirements first. So you have to teach some of those things that are even slightly outside of your product in order to really teach the skills that people need to do their jobs.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to leave it there because 2 minutes to spare. There's lots more questions, and of course we could chat, but that's why we go to SEDMA conferences, so we can talk for 2 whole days about all this stuff.
It's going to be an awesome time in Atlanta. I hope you all join us.
Yes, and thank you so much, Debbie. If you haven't followed Debbie on LinkedIn, you should, because she posts all of this great content all the time and is in a lot of panels and podcasts. But thanks for the great info today. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of it, and we'll see you soon. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.